Hello and welcome to today's video. Today, I want to talk to you about methylation, but I want to make it really simple. I'm going to break it down and make it really easy. I remember when I first tested my genetics and I tried to look at my methylation status, I literally opened the report and I thought, oh my God, and I closed it and I didn't look at it again for a year. I literally paid for the test, got the results, looked at them and closed it and didn't look at them for a year because it's so confusing. It's so complex. There's a lot of things that connect to each other. You hear overmethylator, undermethylator, methyl nutrients, should it take this, should it take that? And it's just really, really confusing and it can be very frustrating because you have this information and you don't really know what to do with it. So today I want to break down this undermethylation, overmethylation thing a little bit for you and hopefully make this a little bit more digestible. So let's start here and don't get overwhelmed because we're not going to go too deeply into this. I just want you to be able to see what sort of genes we're going to be looking at today. So we've got my favorite pictogram, my favorite diagram of the methylation cycle. And we've also got my genetic genie. So these are my genes. You're actually seeing my genes. How vulnerable is that? I'm showing you my imperfections in my genetic code. And this is what I mean. I opened this and I saw all of these colors and all of these like what COMT, VDR, MTHFR. I saw this and I just thought, no, that's for another day. I'm going to go through this with you in the context of undermethylation, overmethylation. We're going to talk about these specific nutrients because there's this, I believe, a misunderstanding that if you have certain genes that make you what's classified as an overmethylator, then you shouldn't take methyl nutrients. And I actually think that's wrong. There are a lot of practitioners that would probably disagree with me, but I'm going to make my case. I'm going to explain it to you, like I said, in very simple ways so you can understand and you can form your own conclusion. So in essence, what's methylation? Methylation is a process that happens every second of every day. We're doing it all the time, hundreds of millions of times a second. It's literally so fundamentally important to health. But if you don't methylate, you die. Just plain and simple, you die. You use it over here. You can see DNA, RNA synthesis. You use it in all of your transferases that end in MT. So like COMT, we've got over here, COMT, methyl transferase. So any of these methyl transferase enzymes function using MT. There's a really interesting one called HNMT, histamine N-methyl transferase. Maybe you've heard of that. It's really important in histamine degradation. So if you have histamine tolerance, it's really important that you understand methylation. It's also one of the really important parts of the phase 2 detoxification pathways in our liver. So we use this to metabolize estrogen, different types of toxic chemicals. It's really fundamentally important. And what I find really helpful is to look at this visual and imagine these as gears, as cogs that are spinning in a machine, basically. And that's basically what's happening. And what your body wants to do to be able to methylate is it wants to spin this cycle over here like this, and it wants to spin this cycle over here like this. So these cogs need to kind of move with each other. And the main reason that we want this one to spin is we want to convert homocysteine, which if homocysteine is high, and this is one of the best tests you can do to see if you're not methylating well. You could do a blood test and you can test your homocysteine levels. And if your homocysteine levels are high, that's pretty much a guarantee that you're not methylating well. If they're low, it doesn't necessarily mean you are methylating well, but it's more likely that you are. And the reason for this is the body uses methylation to recycle homocysteine. So it takes this homocysteine molecule here and it uses either folate over here, or it uses B12, methyl B12, methylcobalamin here, or it uses the BHMT pathway where it uses things like choline, TMG, trimethylglycine, betaine to spin this part of the cycle up here. So we've got these three primary pathways. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. And the body basically, the goal is to take homocysteine and turn it into methionine. This is because methionine then turns into SAMe, which is the primary methyl donor of the body. SAMe is a really powerful methyl nutrient. Some people have tried it and it's completely life-changing. You know, I've had clients that used SAMe and it has taken them out of a lifelong depression that they didn't know was actually a lifelong depression. They just thought that's how life was and they felt great. However, I've also heard that, and again, it's all contextual and you want to look at family history and other genes that contribute to this. I've heard of people using SAMe and it triggers things like psychosis and schizophrenia. And this is because it's an extremely powerful methyl donor and we're kind of shoving methyl donors in right in the last stage that's going to influence the methyl transferases and all of these other functions. So what tends to be a better option is to provide other methyl donors that aren't SAMe right here. Instead, we provide methyl donors down here methyl donors down here and methyl donors down here, because then your body has a little bit of a better chance to handle them. So these things are complex to talk about, but you have to try to simplify them to understand them. So I am going to simplify, and some nuance is going to be lost, but it's necessary to explain things. So we're basically going to categorize our genes. So we're going to use mine here, and we're going to put them into overmethylation genes or undermethylation genes. And it isn't a very significant simplification, but it should kind of prove a point and give you something to work with. So in essence, these at the top here, these COMT, so this is catechol or methyltransferase, these are overmethylation genes. So if you have these, you're more likely to be an overmethylator. And the extent to which you are an overmethylator is going to vary depending on how many of these mutations you have. For example, I have 2 heterozygous mutations in my COMT here, which means I am predisposed to potentially being a bit of an overmethylator. There's also another gene that I don't actually have on here. I think that might be because I got this sample a long time ago, 2023, you can see up here, it's a long time ago. I think that the company does this now, and that is MAO, that's monoamine oxidase. So this isn't technically connected to methylation directly at all. However, it is used in neurotransmitter breakdown, just like COMT is. So catechol or methyltransferase, catechols are like neurotransmitters, basically. It is also connected to some other things like estrogen, but primarily it's really your neurotransmitters. So think about the chemicals that influence how you feel, like serotonin and that sort of thing. So these genes, COMT and MAO, these overmethylation genes, basically what they're responsible for is breaking down your neurotransmitters. So if you have mutations in these genes, what can happen is if for some reason your neurotransmitters in your body build up. So this could happen for a lot of reasons. This could happen from taking too many methyl donors. If you took a bunch of methylation support, all of a sudden, it would flood your body with different neurotransmitters. This could be from doing things like drinking coffee. Drinking coffee can stimulate your body to produce dopamine, to produce things that influence your fight or flight nervous system, like adrenaline, stress hormones, cortisol, things like this. And some of these are broken down through these COMT and MAO pathways. So you might find that if you're like sensitive to caffeine, like I am, like if I have coffee too late before I go to bed, I can't sleep. And that's because these genes up here mean that the coffee stimulates my body to produce all of these neurotransmitters, and then it struggles to break down. So I want you to think of this concept of overmethylation is kind of like your body has some mutations and it struggles to break neurotransmitters down when they've been produced. And you're going to have a certain range of tolerance, and that's going to depend on a lot of other things. Like you can increase or decrease that range of your tolerance to these neurotransmitters hugely through dietary and lifestyle factors, your gut microbiome, supplements that you take. There's a lot that you can do to influence this. So don't see this as like a genetic failure. Like this is like you're going to have to deal with this until death. There's a lot that you can do to change how these genes are expressed. But this means that if you have the COMT genes and the MAO genes, and you have some mutations in here, which is like a downregulation in function, you might be prone to symptoms of overmethylation. And what these symptoms basically are is an accumulation of excess neurotransmitters that your body isn't able to break down. So usually what this looks like are things connected to an excess of neurotransmitters. This could be anxiety. This could be like such an intense level of focus that you're so concentrated that it goes beyond what's actually healthy and it turns into like anxiety or jitteriness. Think about the classic, like, oh, I've had 5 cups of coffee and I haven't had any breakfast. You know, you're like a buzzing on the inside, but you can't actually use any of this energy productively because it's just so erratic. That's kind of a really good example of what this could look like. Depends on the individual and their mutations and lots of other factors. This could also cause things like psychotic episodes, schizophrenia, presentations, things like psychosis. It could cause a lot of different things. It really depends on, there's a lot of different variables. And again, I'm trying to simplify things down. But basically, it means that you create a situation where there's a surplus of neurotransmitters so the body can't break down. And all of those neurotransmitters are just buzzing around in the body. And then it's not improving function. So after hearing that, you might think, oh my God, that sounds terrible. I'm never going to try any methyl donors. All of these outcomes sound absolutely awful, but you have to wait because I have to explain the other side of this equation. Because when you see the other side of the equation, you're going to say that side is just as bad. And this is the key. The balance is found in the middle, and that's where health is. So Now I have to look at undermethylation and the genes that you would associate with an undermethylated state. So these would be your MTHFR genes. So you've got the C677T and the A1298C. There's also another one that I don't have on here that does affect your methylation status as well. These decrease your methylation function. You've also got these MTR and MTRR mutations. These are also undermethylation genes. These could potentially indicate that you don't methylate so well. And then you also have the BHMT genes. So this is, I've just got one here. I believe there is also BHMT 04 and 08 as well. These are also connected to undermethylation genes. And I'm just going to show you on the methylation chart where these genes plug in. So you're going to understand where you might be an undermethylator. So if it's with MTHFR, which is this part here, I have one of these mutations. So I have this MTHFR C677T. I have this mutation. This plugs in here. So this is MTHFR. This is where the MTHFR. So there's basically a line. They're not all written out, but there's a line of MTHFR genes that fit in here. And if you have any mutations, it's basically over here. And you can basically bypass this gene by providing the nutrient that comes after it. So here you've got 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. So this is basically a methylated version of vitamin B9, methylfolate. So if you're somebody like me, where you've got some of the overmethylation genes up here, like the COMT and maybe the MAO, but you've also got undermethylation genes, we need to have a bit more of a careful approach to this. So I've got this gene here. This is an undermethylation gene. Next, we have the MTR and MTRR mutations. These are grouped together because they have similar functions. These are all connected to B12 methylation and B12 recycling, and also using B12 as a metal donor. So you can see you've got MTR here and MTRR here. You've got this little sort of like recycling B12. So if you have any of the MTR and MTRR mutations, you have a potential undermethylation effect when it comes to B12. So in this context, providing B12 with a methyl donor, also known as methylcobalamin, could be helpful for you because, again, you completely bypass these faulty genes. And then finally, over here, we've got BHMT. I've got O2. You could also have O4 or OA. And I've got a double mutation. That means my body really struggles to methylate here. So this is called the BHMT shunt. This is like a shortcut that the body uses to go from homocysteine straight to methionine using the BHMT pathway. I also have a mutation here. So if you have a mutation in BHMT, you have a deficit of methylation here. So you might be an undermethylator with regards to this. And the best way that you can support the body here are things like trimethylglycine, things like betaine, things like choline. So like phosphatidylcholine is one reason I really like sunflower lecithin. I find this gene tends to be really connected to people that have poor bile flow. So if you've had your gallbladder removed, or if you struggle with fat malabsorption, it's really common to have a BHMT mutation. Normally when I see someone's symptoms, I can kind of like guess, or I can bet which genes they're going to have and which they aren't based on their presentation. And I'm right like 80% of the time. It's quite funny actually. So as you can see, I've got like a full spectrum of deficit in regards to my methylation. I've got the MTHFR one, I've got the MTRR and the MTR one. I think I have both. Let me check. No, I just have the MTRR. So I don't have this one, but I've got this one, and this one. So I've got a pretty full sweep. My body, it tends towards having this undermethylation presentation. So what this actually looks like symptom-wise is kind of the opposite of what we looked at when we looked at what does an overmethylator look like, you know, where they have so much anxiety, so much restlessness, this like almost agitation and bordering into like potentially psychosis or psychotic breaks, these types of episodes. You've got the complete opposite. So on the opposite side of this, you've got sort of like a chronic fatigue syndrome kind of presentation. So chronic lethargy, just on a cellular level, like on a mitochondrial level, you just feel like there is not a single ounce of energy in your body. It feels like every single movement is costing your body so much. And that's because it's costing these methyl donors that you don't have. You're in methyl there, basically. You also see this in the mood. It tends to be in a more of a depressed state. So you'll see a lot of despondency, a lot of depersonalization, a lot of depression, a lot of anhedonia, which is where you don't really feel any positive emotion. It's almost just like you're watching your life happen in third person and you don't really get much positive emotion or much joy. You just almost kind of existing. You just kind of feel alive, but not really, you know, because it's not really you that's alive. It's a very particular feeling. And I can tell you this is awful. And I've experienced both states. I've gone to the shaking anxiety. I've been in the chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, depersonalization. I've been on both sides and they're both horrible. But here's why I think the idea of overmethylation is kind of a myth. And this is that if you are an overmethylator, the advice that you tend to be given is that you shouldn't take methyl donors and you should take precursors. That doesn't really work, in my opinion, because if you have a mutation here, for example, let's look at MTHFR specifically, but you could apply this to all of the other examples. If you have a mutation in MTHFR specifically, this means that your body cannot attach the methyl group to it. And the normal advice is to take something like folinic acid, which is like a precursor. The point is, though, you're now providing a nutrient that is just before this methylated version, but your body still needs to methylate it, and you still have the mutation. So your body doesn't methylate it very well. So can you see how that doesn't really make sense? Because your body needs methylation support. But at the same time, if we provide too much methylation support, the body is going to spin this cycle really fast, and you're going to produce a whole bunch of neurotransmitters and things that make you feel anxious and wired, and that's not good as well. The key in my experience, and I've done this personally, so this is not just like a random idea that I'm giving you, this has been my actual experience, but I've seen this with a lot of clients as well. If you do have this kind of mixed presentation where you have some of these mutations down here, which imply that you have a methylation need, but you also have these genes up here, which imply that you could be very sensitive to them and have an overmethylator presentation, then the key is actually in the dosage and is in figuring out where do we provide your methyl donors specifically for you? Where does your body actually need them? So for example, I have all of them. So for me, taking all of them is actually really helpful. And this is exactly what I have found to be true. I take methylfolate, I take a B complex, so that's got all of the B vitamins in, including methylfolate and including methylcobalamin. I take more methylcobalamin in B12 injections, and I take sunflower lecithin, which is very rich in phosphatidylcholine and other phospholipids, which help with bile flow, which really helps this part down here, this BHMT. And for me, this is my optimal solution. This provides me with the best outcome where I don't go into anxiety and restlessness, and it doesn't negatively affect my sleep or give me any of those like overmethylation symptoms, but I'm able to maintain a good methylation state where I have energy, I have clarity, my brain works really well, clearly, as you can see, articulating this video. I can run my business, I can be there for my family, I can do all of the things that could show up in my life because I have the energy. And I simply didn't have this when I didn't have the methyl donors. If you have some of these mutations, but not all of them, so let's say you have the overmethylation presentation, so you have some of the COMT and some of the MAO mutations, but you don't have any MTHFR mutations, and you do have MTR mutations. You taking methylfolate doesn't make any sense because you don't have a mutation there. You should take folinic acid instead because there is no gene that's going to be the rate limiting factor because you don't have a mutation here. But if you do have the MTR and MTRR mutations, you should take methylcobalamin, not trying to avoid that methyl donor by taking things like adenosylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin, because you have a mutation here, which means your gene is going to become your rate limiting factor and your body is going to struggle to basically remethylate that. And then you're going to get stuck on the demethylated side, on the undermethylation side, which is bad. We don't want that. So it's really important. And this is why making videos about genetics and methylation is really hard. And that's why you don't see me make many videos about it. It's really hard. It's really nuanced because it's so individualized and it's so complex and there's so much niche, like this is good for this person and not good for this person. And this is really bad for that person and this is going to be amazing. So it's complex. If you've got, so overall, let me break it down for you. If you have any of the overmethylation genes, COMT or MAO, you need to be more careful if you take any methylation support. And if you don't have any of these mutations down here, you don't have any genes that are mutated in MTHFR, MTR or MTRR or BHMT, you probably don't need any methyl support. So you're not going to benefit from them and you're actually potentially going to make yourself worse. If you do have the overmethylation genes like COMT and MAO, and you do have some of the undermethylation genes, then you should support with methyl nutrients for the ones that you specifically have. If you have any of the MTHFR genes, you might want to consider methylfolate. If you have any of the MTR or MTRR genes, you might want to consider methyl B12. And if you have BHMT, you might want to consider trimethylglycine, sunflower lecithin or some other compound that's got something like choline, phosphatidylcholine in it, or choline bitartrate, they would all work. Or betaine. It's not the same as betaine HCl, it's different. Actually, now I think about it, betaine might actually be trimethylglycine. I don't know. Maybe, as you can see, this is complex stuff. But provide specific support for where you have your specific mutation. And if you have any of these mutations down here, so let's say you've got the MTHFR one and the MTR and MTRR ones, and you don't have any COMT mutations at all, you're very unlikely to be an overmethylator. So you should experiment with taking the methylfolate for these ones and the methylcobalamin for these ones, and you probably can be a bit less cautious. You can probably start with much, much higher doses. So now it might be helpful for me to actually give you an idea of, if you are like me and you've got a combination of the overmethylation genes here and the undermethylation genes here, what sort of dosages should we be looking at starting at? And how do we figure this out with nuance? Because this is the most difficult one. If you just have the COMT ones, it's easy. You don't need methylation support. If you just have the undermethylation genes, the ones down here that are highlighted, then you do need methylation support and you're very unlikely to have an overmethylation reaction. So you don't really need much help there. That's very, very simple. But if you're like me, where you're in the middle, where you've got a little bit of both, you've got some of the overmethylation genes and some of the undermethylation genes, this is where you need a bit more of a personalized approach. And also we need to be a little bit more cautious and we need to be a little bit more nuanced in the approach. So first of all, only support where you have a deficit. If you have methylation genes, MTHFR, methylfolate, MTR and MTRR, methylcobalamin, BHMT, betaine, trimethylglycine, choline, those sorts of things. Don't provide nutrients in places you don't have mutations. If you want to support those instead, use the precursor or an unmethylated form. For example, for MTHFR, if you don't have a mutation here, use folinic acid. With MTR and MTRR, if you don't have a mutation, use hydroxycobalamin or adenosylcobalamin. No one should use cyanocobalamin under any circumstances. Is not healthy. It's not good for your body. Do not use cyanocobalamin. And if you don't have mutations in BHMT, just don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. It's no problem. So what I would suggest, if you're in this mixed spot, kind of like me, I would suggest try a B complex and start on a really small dose. So I would actually suggest about 1/10 of the dose. You could go even lower. 1/20th could also work. The reason for this is you're going to provide a lot of different inputs for different points through your metabolism, through your methylation cycles. We're just looking at the specific methyl donor nutrients today, but there are a lot of other nutrients that are really important in this cycle, like riboflavin, B2, P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, or B6. These other nutrients are really, really important. And there's also like trace minerals and cofactors and all these other things. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it really simple today. But the best place that I would recommend you start is a B complex on a really low dose. And when I say B complex, I mean a methylated B complex. You've got a couple of good different options. You could try Thorn, you could try, I've got some on my supplement list, which I will make sure that I put a link to somewhere down below. I think there's one called like Integrative Nutrition. I think that's a nice one. There's a lot of good options. I think Seeking Health also has a nice one as well. There are lots of really good options. When you take a B complex out of the capsule, it does taste quite bad. So do expect that. It tastes, in my opinion, vile. I would say it's quite horrible. It is one of the worst tasting things, but sometimes it's necessary to reduce the dose and build that up really, really gradually. If you are going to experiment with isolated nutrients, so things like B12 or folate, I would be really careful, especially if you have any sort of like anemia, megaloblastic anemia, pernicious anemia, anything like that. Because if you take one nutrient and not the other, like B9 and not B12, or B12 and not B9, it can kind of disguise that problem. So these nutrients are really, really important together. Again, why I'm recommending taking a B complex first. But if you do take them as individual doses because you want to kind of increase the dose of each one individually, you can also do that as well. For me personally, I have some chronic gastritis from an unfortunate incident that happened. Maybe I'll tell you the story one day, maybe not. And I don't absorb B12 very well from my digestive system. So for me, I find B12 injections to be really important. I can't really get a good absorption just from taking those supplements orally. So for me, I need B12 injections. If you have SIBO or any other gut issues that are preventing you from absorbing your B12 well, this could be like a bypass surgery, or if you had any of your small intestine removed, you might benefit from using B12 injections instead. Really safe, really effective. I've got a bunch of videos on them as well, so you can go and check those out if you want them. Just search in the bar at the top, William Dickinson, B12 injections. You'll find them there. Really easy to do, actually. Believe it or not. I know self-injection is a bit scary for some people, but actually not that bad at all. And if you've got the BHMT mutation, you could experiment with something like phosphatidylcholine or something like sunflower lecithin. I find this tends to be really, really well tolerated. So experiment with these things, but just start on a really small dose. Don't take this belief or this explanation that someone's given you that you're an overmethylator, which means you now can't use methyl nutrients. You can, but you just have to start really, really small and increase the dose very gradually over time. And you might find that your maximum dose is lower than a lot of people. I know people that do really good. So I'll use folate again as the example. I know people with different genetic presentations. Some do really well on like 400. Some people do really well on like 400 micrograms. I know some people, and like me personally, I do really well on 1,000 micrograms. I know some people that have done 25,000 micrograms, which is insane to me, but they don't have COMT mutations. They don't have MAO mutations. They don't have an overmethylation. So it doesn't really create problem for them. So everyone needs a different solution. And I know that this maybe feels complex. I'm hoping that you're not feeling too confused, because this, I mean, look at how confusing it looks. And then look at this cycle. It's a lot. It really is a lot to take in. But I'm really hoping that I've helped to break this down in a way that's a little bit more easy for you to understand. And hopefully I've given you some actionable takeaways. So you've got something you can actually do after this video. If you have any questions or any pointers or tips about anything that I talked about today, I'd love to hear from you in a comment below. If you have a friend that you know thinks methylation is really important or doesn't even know what methylation is and you think it's really important for them, I would really, really appreciate it very sincerely if you could share this with them, because this is some very hard-earned knowledge that I learned through a lot of suffering. And I know that there are a lot of other people out there suffering as well because they don't have this knowledge in their hands. And these sorts of videos are very, very difficult to get to go viral or to really get the numbers up and really get the YouTube algorithm to take them and deliver them to the people that really need them. The best thing that you can do is post it on Reddit, post it in a Facebook group, post it somewhere, or share it in a group chat, or send it to a friend or something. It really, really helps me out. And it really helps them out as well. You simply can't trust the YouTube algorithm to deliver it to the people that need it, because a lot of the time it just doesn't. And if you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, which I'm hoping you aren't, because I hope I did a really good job today, but if you are still feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or you feel like you want a little bit more of a personalized support and you want to look at your genes, we could also look at other things as well, like your gut testing, hormone panel. Obviously, we can do your genetics and look at methylation nutrients and things like that. And obviously your symptoms. Bring all of this together to look at this whole situation holistically and have me help you build a roadmap to wellness so we can figure out what are your 3 actionable steps of new things to add or doses to change that are going to give you the best health outcome over the next 6 months. I'd be really interested to do a consultation with you. I've had the opportunity to do over 1,000 consultations now. This is literally my life's work, my full-time job. I've built my whole life around this because it makes such a profound impact in my life and my health. And now I would really like to help you do the same. So I'm hoping you're not feeling too overwhelmed, but even if you are, and you want a little bit of extra and personalized support, reach out or send me an email, support@williamdickinson.co.uk, and we'll look at arranging a consultation together. I hope you're doing really great, and I hope you found this really interesting and that your brain is still in one piece and it hasn't been completely fried and sizzled, because I know how you feel if that is the case, but hopefully this wasn't too complicated for you. So that's everything from me today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.